Give me the cue. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Keith Cantrell here. Let's give it a few more minutes so other people can join us. All right. I appreciate everybody joining. Let's give it a couple more minutes. I still see people are still coming in, so just another minute. We'll probably start about 2 or 3 minutes after the hour. All right. I appreciate everybody joining. Just one more little announcement here. We're gonna start up in about another minute. Give it about one more minute. When I see people not trickling in anymore, then we'll kick things off. All right, just about 30 more seconds. I think we'll get things started. Okay, so I think things have settled down. I appreciate everybody joining us today. Welcome to the webinar where we're going to discuss the new VS Code extension that will help speed up your process when interacting with an FSX for ONTAP file system. My name is Keith Cantrell. I'm a product solution architect with NetApp. I've been here for roughly 9 years, with the last 3 years working with our cloud-based products, specifically FSX for ONTAP. With me is Shmuel Danan. Shmuel, would you like to introduce yourself and kick things off?
Yeah, thank you very much, Keith. My name is Shmuel. I'm product manager within the FSX for ONTAP team. Yeah, 8 years at NetApp. Um, and yeah, doing product management roles and customer facing roles. And yeah, let's cover for the agenda for today. We're basically going to present the VS Code extension for VS Code. VS Code extension is for FSX for ONTAP. We will discuss the challenges we're trying to solve for the DevOps or developers that are using or utilizing FSX for ONTAP. And we're going to present the capabilities, the use cases of using the VS Code extension for FSX for ONTAP. And then Keith will cover a demo that will basically demonstrate all of the capabilities that we will discuss in this presentation. And we're also going to touch on what are the roadmap items going forward and where are we heading. And then we will obviously leave some room for questions and answers at the end. Next slide. Yeah. Next one. Okay. So let's talk about developers or developers that interact with storage systems, developing infrastructure as code, for example. So the general flow is that developers, they develop in their IDE, in VS Code, in Cursor, and PyCharm, other IDEs you might think of. And basically, when they need to interact with storage, um, it might slow down things. It might slow down things because they might not have access to the AWS console. They might not be familiar with storage. They're not storage proficients, they're developers. They're not familiar with enterprise storage systems, especially something which is that feature rich like FSX for ONTAP. So when a developer, in many cases, needs to interact with storage, needs to configure storage, it might take some time due to a lot of parameters, and the cycle basically is um, it gets them out of the context, and then it basically slows down development time. Now let's touch on the next slide on some few possible reasons for that. So one is just basic fact that I need to do some context switching. So if I'm developing in VS Code, now I have to switch to the AWS console or even to the ONTAP CLI. And maybe even if I want to browse through files in my while I'm in the development stages, now I need to mount an EC2 just to browse my files and to basically get uh, um, data there or observe data there and so on and so forth. Um, Sometimes our customers not necessarily have the access to the AWS console, and then they have to reach out to their storage manager, to their admins to ask for permissions, and this basically slows down the process. Now, if I'm not that storage savvy, which a lot of our cloud customers are not, then it also leaves a room for mistakes because then it might be that now need to do a snap mirror, a clone, snapshot, which might be easy for the day-to-day storage admin. But if I'm a developer and I'm not that familiar with ONTAP, it might take me some time, and it could be a multi-step process which can be error-prone and can lead to misconfigurations. And also, now that I have to do operations with something with ONTAP, now I need to learn the ONTAP CLI. The ONTAP CLI has a lot of commands. It's basically it's an expertise by itself. How do we help our cloud customers basically bridge the gap in a very easy way? So the bottom line, storage complexity might steal our customers, which could be DevOps or developers, and basically the extension. Um, uh, One of its major goals is to assist and to empower developers and DevOps to use FSX for ONTAP. Next slide. So yeah, simplifying developer workflow. So what we're suggesting here is an AI-powered VS Code extension, and we will show it in the demo how it looks like, that can generate infrastructure as code, contextualized infrastructure as code scripts for FSX for ONTAP. Um, it lets developer create, optimize, deploy storage within the VS Code with the help of GitHub Copilot or Amazon Bedrock. And then it basically makes the work order of magnitude faster. So inside VS Code, they can stay inside VS Code, not open any other tickets, not have any type of context switching to another system. So basically, where they like things to be, we're basically keep the developers in the IDE and providing all the capabilities they need within that environment. Next slide. Okay, so some of the core components. So we're providing a native VS Code integration. So everything lives within the IDE. We integrated the AWS APIs together with the ONTAP, with the ONTAP capabilities, the ONTAP APIs, you may say, and also the CloudWatch metrics with um, GitHub Copilot and Amazon Bedrock, which basically means customer can ask questions in regards to their metrics, can ask questions in regards to everything that's available through the ONTAP CLI or the AWS API, and we will show some example later. We provide one-click operations to streamline the process. With the new S3 capabilities, and this is a really nice one, we enable them to do some very easy file browsing. Okay, and so instead of them need to mount an EC2 and then browse into the file system contents and interact with files, we enable them to browse through the files, open them in the editor, so they can interact with files, which can streamline the work, especially in the development stages. And last thing and not least, one second, the last thing is intelligent infrastructure as code template generation. So we provide either pre-configured IAC templates according to best practices, but not only that, I think the more um, uh, important thing here, we're providing a Copilot, basically, the GitHub Copilot, and the Amazon Bedrock together with us that we expose the AWS API, the ONTAP CLI, we are enabling customer to generate infrastructure as code templates. Let me give you an example and Keith will show it later. If I have a file system that I created in the POC, in the POC phase, I can click a button or I can ask our chat participant to generate an equivalent infrastructure as code um, for that specific file systems, including the configurations and SVMs and volumes and so on and so forth. Next slide. So, core features and capabilities. One, native VS Code integration. We are living within the IDE. We're bringing our capabilities to where developers, to where DevOps people spend their time. Secondly, authentication. In terms of authentication, it's frictionless. So customer can onboard in literally no more than 10 seconds, and we will show later how that works. GitHub Copilot integration. Again, we let our customer ask any question on AWS FSx for ONTAP APIs, cloud-related storage, CloudWatch metrics, and ONTAP operating systems. And we enabled the generation of CloudFormation, Terraform, not limited to it, could be TypeScript and any other language. Um, so you can generate code from existing resources, and we enable file content browsing via the S3 access point. So I think these are the main pillars, the core capabilities we deliver, and we will show it in a demo in a few seconds. Next slide. Yes, use cases. So I just naming a few what we see our customers using it for. So generate IAC script, as I said before, it's just one. Keith can maybe elaborate on the um, some troubleshooting scenarios that we see also as very useful using the extension.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. By leveraging this extension, it allows you to query, what's going on with my file system. So let's say you're having weird performance issues or maybe in timeouts, and you need to know, is the file system just getting overwhelmed and that's causing my problem? Maybe there's a networking issue, maybe it's something else. But with the extension, you can quickly query the file system, see what the volumes are, see what things like IOs, max IOs, latency, that kind of information. And so you can quickly narrow down where your problems might be, all using natural language. So you don't have to go figure out what the exact command is or page is within the console to get this information. It's all within the IDE. You just ask it a question and it gives you the answer.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. And troubleshooting is one of the common ones, I would assume. And then also think about storage operations. Um, the use of AI, I'm assuming most of us are using AI on a daily basis, but create inventory reports for your storage systems, getting health status. And Keith will show some examples later, but basically these are the things that, it's the bread and butter of, why we are using also um, LLMs on a daily basis instead of doing it ourselves. Understand file usage patterns, so leveraging the S3 access point and browsing capabilities, so we can better understand what is the underlying data in our storage systems, and without the need to mount them. And testing environment, so very easy. Spin up. Instead of going to the console or reading a lot of documentation, it's very easy. In the IDE, we have the templates to create a file systems. Once you create a file systems, you can do all of these operations in a one click in a one click, and so you don't have to re-authenticate all the time, even if you're doing on-top operation, and we'll show it later, in terms of how that plays when you're using the VS Code extension. So with no further delays, I would like to hand it over to Keith to go over the demo to show everything we just discussed.
All right, great. Give me a couple seconds here to share the appropriate window here, and we will get started. All right, everybody should have seen just a typical VS Code extension IDE that I have going here. The first thing you'd want to do to get started using the new VS Code extension, of course, is to install it. Simple enough to do, just click on the extension icon and search for, guess what, NetApp. When you search for NetApp, you're going to see the extension, and you can see, sure enough, we have plugins for the other hyperscalers, but right now we're going to talk about the one for FSx for ONTAP. You just click on that, and over here, I already have it installed, of course, but if I didn't, this would say install. You would just click on that. It's going to download it from the VS Code, VS Code library, and load it and install it. It takes about a minute or so for it to do all that. Once it's up and running, you should see a little N icon here for NetApp. You can click on that. That brings you, right to the extension. And the first thing you'll need to do is give it credentials. Now, if you've already installed the AWS CLI, and most people have, then it's just going to leverage those extensions. And frankly, that's where it gets those credentials, is from the same way that AWS CLI gets its credentials. If you don't have that, then you can click on this little home button, and then here you'll see connect. You click on that, and it's either going to prompt you which profile do you want to use. Again, if you already have the CLI installed, then it'll be there. Or if you're using like something like Boto 3 or some other one of the API toolkits, you probably already have these credentials in place. If you don't, though, you can just click Add New Profile. You give it a name. You will need to give it an access key and the secret key. That's how it authenticates. So you'll have to get that to be able to deploy this. And of course, you don't need to have to, but you can provide a region, a default region, but that's not really important right now, but that's just one of the questions that that's in one of these profiles. Once you fill that information, you can click save, and it'll be your active profile. If you have multiple profiles, you can come here and just select the profile you want to use. Once you do that, this panel here, this is kind of the Explorer panel. It will start to populate with the regions that you've selected. I think by default it goes to the US East one, but if you want to select other regions, you just click on this little globe icon. It lists all the regions, and you can search things. So if you need to quickly limit the choices to something that you're more interested in, you just click on the regions you want and click OK when you're done. And then this will definitely start to populate with the regions that you've selected. As you expand a region, it's going to show all the FSx ONTAP file systems that it's found. Once you get the file system, it's going to show you the SVMs that are there. Expand the SVMs. Of course, it's going to show you all the volumes. So pretty basic navigation through the Explorer, as you might imagine. But this is just the first part of the authentication. As you probably know, if you've used FSx for ONTAP at all, that it has lots more features than there's an AWS API for. So things like snapshots, clones, snap mirror, all those things you really have to do either on the command line or through some automation. But regardless, it needs the credentials for the ONTAP system itself and not an IMA permission. The extension can leverage those credentials as well. So the first thing you need to do is give it those credentials. And the way you do that is if you have a system that you haven't give credentials, you'll notice the cloud is kind of an empty cloud. If you have given the credentials, they're already there. It's a circle with a check mark. But so if you already have, if you have one that you haven't, you can just click on the little person icon. It says configure ONTAP credentials. If it's one you've already done, you can right click and it's the same thing. And it's just going to prompt you for the username. This can be any user account that exists on the FSX for ONTAP file system. And then, of course, it's going to ask for the password. Give that. Then the third question is, how do you want it to access it? If you're working within a network where you have network connectivity to the FSX ONTAP file system, then by all means, select direct. If you don't, if you're like me and my network is, working from home, like so many people are, and I don't really have access directly, but I still need to communicate with it, you can create what's called an EC2 Instance Connect endpoint. Really easy to do. Go to the AWS console, you see endpoints, you say create, and EC2 Instance Connect will be one of the options, and you just have to fill in a couple things like what subnet you want it to go out on. And then you just give that endpoint here, and I've already got that in my copy paste buffer, and you provide that. Then it's going to go on, try to connect to the system. You should see some status here saying whether that was successful or not. And in my case, it was. So now it was able to successfully log into the system with those credentials that I provided. Now, if I want to do something like, let's say I want to create a snapshot on a file system, again, something you really can't do from the AWS console. And this is an ONTAP snapshot, not an AWS snapshot. You can see there's a little icon here, create snapshot. You can click on that. Just looking for a name, give the name of the snapshot, hit return. And again, you look at the bottom, you can see the status of the operation that's happening, and it did successfully create a snapshot, all without me having to provide any credentials or anything. Another thing you can do, if you want to just log onto a file system, you can click on the little icon here and it'll SSH directly into the file system, all within the IDE. Don't have to go bring up a SSH or a PuTTY session or something. It is still going to prompt me for a password. It's kind of just an extra security method. We don't want you walk away from the screen and somebody clicks on that. Now they have full access to a file system. So it is going to prompt you for the credentials here. But you just provide those, and now you're pretty much on a file system, just like you've logged right into it, because effectively you have. So if you need to do any extra commands that you can't do through the GUI, then you can do it there again, all without having to leave the environment. Small talked about browsing files, and that's done through a feature that AWS recently added, which was an S3 access point. It leverages a capability that ONTAP has had all along, and that's the ability to do multi-protocol access. And so, as you may know, you have a volume. Typically, most people know you can access it from NFS and sys. A lot of people don't know you can also access it as an S3 object store. And AWS leveraged that capability, and now you can access that volume from AWS as a bona fide S3 bucket. So once you create the access point, it's S3:// and they create some alias name for it, but you can access all the files and folders as an S3 bucket. The cool benefit of that, not only allowing you to browse the files right here within the IDE, that it also means you can use the files in your volumes in any AWS service that requires an S3 bucket. Think, all the analytic capabilities that are built into AWS, most of them require an S3 bucket, and this allows you to leverage those files. So if you're currently copying things into a bucket just so you can run some kind of analysis, you won't have to do that anymore. You can point them just directly to your volume. But to get to how we're leveraging it with the extension, you can see I can expand this one. I actually have an access point associated to me. It shows the access point, and then lo and behold, here are the files. Not a lot, but here are the files that are within that volume. And now I can just click on that and bring it up and see the contents of those files. Other things that you can do within the extension, If we go back to this home button, you can see that it can help you create a CloudFormation template that will deploy another file system. So if you're looking for a starting point, I need to create a file system that has a security group that allow all the access that I want, then this will quickly create that for you. You can also do Terraform, and these are pointers to give you other resources to help you manage your FSXN file system and or leverage other technologies. You can even go a bit further if you want to right click on a SVM. You'll see add a new volume using CloudFormation or Terraform. If I click on that, again, it gives me a template in the various languages that would allow me to quickly create a volume in this case, or if I'm on a file system, I can create a SVM with Terraform. So if I'm looking for a template, I don't want to have to go searching on the web. What's a quick way to do that? You can just right click and get that information for you. So those are all the navigation things. Really, one of the best benefits of the extension is the fact that it allows you to use the chatbot, or it's integrated with the chatbot. So to leverage the extension of the chatbot, you do @FSX that signals to the chatbot, hey, I want you to use the VS Code extension from NetApp. And then you can do simple questions or any question you want, but I'm going to do a simple one at first, like, what file systems do I have access to? And it's going to go out there. It's using Bedrock to answer the question. It realizes, oh, I need to describe file systems. I'm going to go out and figure out those file systems. And of course, it does take a little bit of time. This isn't a video. This is actually a real live demo asking these questions. So here it comes up, gives me all the information I was looking for. It knew I had a couple of regions selected, and it gives me the information. But it's like, I really, can you put that in a table? And let's have it prettied up a little bit for us. That's one of the cool things about these chatbots. They easily will do things for you. And boom, now I have a nice table. Another thing I can do, like I mentioned earlier, it has the ability to get into the CloudWatch metrics. So let's say I want to know what the average latency is of a file system, and I can give it just that kind of question. I'm going to cut and paste this so you guys don't see what a poor typist I am. We can just say, hey, what's the average latency here of a file system that I picked out? And it's going to go out and say, okay, I need to go get the CloudWatch metrics for that. And it's going to do a little research and figure out that command. And of course, leverage the credentials that I provided to get that information and then provide it for me. There we go. And it's gotten all the information for us, And of course, this is just a lab system. It's not doing anything, but it's nice. And not only is it gave me the information I wanted, but it also gave me some key observations. Again, if I had, probably a more active file system, these observations would have been a lot more useful. Another thing you can do, we mentioned it can generate infrastructure as code templates. Let's say I wanted to generate another file system that looks just like the one I have. So I'm saying, hey, create a Terraform script that generates a file system like this one I have called prod primary FSXN and all its SVM and volumes. So it realizes, well, I got to get the file systems. I got to get the SVMs, and he's going to have to get the volumes, and he's going to figure all that stuff out. And this one does take a little bit of time, but it will figure it out. So if you're trying to say, okay, this one's my test environment. Now I'm ready to push this into QA or maybe production, but I want, the exact file system with the same characteristics, the same IOPS, throughput, volumes, volume names, SVMs, all that type of information. Then the AI bot can go query all that information and gather it in one place and then generate the template for us. And of course, again, a live demo, so I can't kick it go any faster. Here we go. So it didn't take too long, and you can see it knows, of course, to use the right provider. It's configuring the provider, and it is a template, so it sets some volumes or variables and whatnot. And then here's the file system. the SVMs and all the volumes, yeah, that were in there. It creates all those in there. So does a great job with generating the template. And then it also even tells you this is how you should run it. Um, the last thing I wanted to point out, one other feature, it can leverage those FSX for ONTAP credentials. So you can ask it questions that, again, don't have an AWS API for. So in this example, I'm going to say, show me all the snap mirror relationships from a particular file system. And it's going to be able to leverage those things. It realizes first I need to get the file system information, because it's got to find, the IP address and that kind of stuff to know where to connect to. And then it's going to realize, oh yeah, I need to run SSH against this to run that command to get the information for me. And then there it goes. It's going to run SSH. He knows now the IP address, the person to log in as, because I've given those credentials, and it's given that information. And so put it up on the screen. I think it's going to run another iteration of this where it's going to get the health and then create a table for me, but we don't necessarily have to wait for all that. Uh, so did I forget anything? Is there anything else we want to show here?
No, I think let me just turn my video on. No, I think you covered a lot.
Yep,
I
and
think, yeah, I
about
think, yeah, I
the
think we
help.
covered a lot, and actually, that's a very nice report. That it's not trivial. I can tell also from other tools I'm personally using. It's not something which is trivial to extract, but AI agents know their work, and they do it very well, and that's also something which I think could be very valuable for not just a storage admin, even a DevOps person, which is happen to use FSX for ONTAP. Um, so definitely very, very powerful. Yeah, let's go to the next slide where I will cover some roadmap items. So yeah, so we started, Keith just showed you the S3 browsing capabilities, file browsing capabilities. So, and at the end of the day, once we have this capability to browse files, we can also view files through the editor. It also makes sense to download and upload and interact with files I would say in an easier way. Um, than needing to mount EC2. So we're planning to provide download, upload capability also with this browsing option in the VS Code extension. We are planning to introduce some agentic AI capabilities to help customers with troubleshooting scenario, cost optimization, all within VS Code, Cursor, and this type of frameworks. Um, we're going to enhance the single-click operations, could be clones, restores from snapshots, snap mirror, and so on and so forth. Um, so the environment will be rich in terms of the actions that it can provide. Just a good note in regards to that the LLM doesn't have the permission to do any actions. Okay, it can only get information from the file systems, from the AWS API, from the CloudWatch, and um, to do operations, you can either do it through the SSH capability that Keith was showing before, or with the single-click ONTAP operations that are available right now, and the things that will become available in the future. And we're going to enhance the infrastructure as code templates and capabilities as we see more and more customers, especially in the cloud, also when using FSX, going into a more um, um, infrastructure as code as a practice, and GitOps and everything that relates to that. So basically, we want to help them do that with FSX, providing best practices to do it with Terraform, CloudFormation, and so on. Yeah, so that's it. I think from our side, we have some time. We left some time for Q&As, so if you have any, feel free.
And I don't know if people can unmute. I believe there's a Q&A, or you can just put things in the chat if you have any questions.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, I'm checking the Q&A.
I'm not seeing.
What credential? Okay, Pradeep is asking what credential are we using to to view the content of a file? If you're using FSX admin, is not security risk because FSX admin. Okay. Keith, would you like to take that or would you like me to take
Yeah,
that?
sure, sure.
Yeah.
So to look at the contents, it's leveraging that S3 access point. And there's two levels of access or protections or permissions that get involved there. One, you can protect it on the S3 side. So an IMA permission that would allow you access to even get into the bucket itself. So there's those permissions to block access or allow access in the S3 bucket. And then on the back end, the way that it translates that to doing, looking at those files through the S3 object store capability, there is a single user that it will do that as. So that gets translated to an ONTAP user, typically a sys or an NFS or Unix user, and that user also has to have read and potentially write access to that volume and file. So if either one of those areas block access, then the user won't be able to access the file. So there is lots of permissions in place. It's just up to you to how open or closed you want that environment.
Yeah. Um, okay. So there is another question on is there a doc to log in to FSX through VS Code and NetApp extension? I'm assuming you're referring to how do I get started? And that's a question posted by George. I can share the link. Um, um, Liat, how can we share a link in this, or should we just send it to the participant afterwards?
I think you could put it in the
I
chat.
put the link in the chat and also they'll have it
Ah,
in the
okay, it's the
email
webinar
box.
chat. So yeah, so Liat posted a link to the marketplace. So basically, you need to have, as you can imagine, you need to have a VS Code installed already. And as Keith was showing, you can either go to the VS Code extension. If you don't have VS Code, um, you can start by installing VS Code and then go to the link that Liat was sharing.
Yeah. So once you install the extension to be able to log directly into it, really it's just a matter of clicking on that the person icon that allows you to provide the credentials. And then you click on that and you provide the credentials. And then if you have to do the instance connect, you have to create that endpoint first and then provide that endpoint, and then it just logs you in. You will still have to provide a password just because for security reasons, we don't want to give you full access without typing in a password each time.
Yeah, there's another question I see here that if I create a S3 access point and give permission to a user called user one and no one else, will I still be able to see the content of file from VS Code using FSX admin credentials? So to answer that question, the authentication is not related to FSX admin role. From the ONTAP CLI, it's basically the S3 access point works based on the POSIX authentication. So basically, if I'm a user, if I were creating files as in, let's say I have like a EC2 instance and I created file using my EC2 user, um, then if the endpoint is um, created with the user. Keith hasn't shown it in the demo, but when you create an S3 endpoint, you can do it also through the VS Code extension. You need to provide what is the user. Okay, and it's a Unix user. In that case, it could be a Windows user, but we don't cover that in the VS Code extension. But for the Unix user, if I say EC2 user, then I will only be able to view the files that are under the EC2 user that created them. Okay, so it's a POSIX authentication versus it's not related to the FSX admin role in any sense. Okay, so and just to make things clear. By the way, that's also something that can be done. You can always specify if you wish, and that's fine from a security, and again, it's a consideration from a security standpoint. You can always specify that the endpoint is the root user, and then all files should be accessible if you specify that. Okay? But then, to your question, it's not about the ONTAP role. It's really about the Unix role that was creating the files to begin with, and then you will be able to see only the files that you have permissions to from a POSIX standpoint.
All right. Any other questions out there? All right. I guess that's all the questions. Appreciate everybody's time. It's been great talking about the VS Code extension. And there's some links in the chat that'll show you how to get started, give some documentation for it. And like I showed in the demo, it's really quite easy. Just go to the extension, search for NetApp, and you should be well on your way. It's great meeting everybody, and thank you.
Thank you very much.